I read ahead this morning, and it was so fascinating into the next chapter. I began with the next chapter. And it was so fascinating that when I stopped, I knew when I should stop, and I wanted to read more. And it reminded me of needing to know when to stop and absorb. And at least at my age, it was very important to know when to stop. Because when I stood up, I knew how tired I was. The phrase in English is beating a dead horse. Which I think was appropriate. I think all of us know, no matter what our age is, when you keep reading and reading because it's so good, it turns into beating a dead horse. And then you could decide that the book is worthless. Because it's no longer generating fascination. It's actually that the tool is no longer any good. That's so important. So it reminded me of doing analytical reading and reflection, and then doing stabilizing reflection, right? Stopping and concentrating on this which is so fascinating. So important, bringing it home. And well, we're so lucky to have this opportunity. I feel that way. I'm so lucky to have this opportunity to reflect on this which is so meaningful and so profound. Anyway, if I wrote it myself, I'd have difficulty saying it's so profound. But I merely translated the words. Then when I came back later, I went over what we're now reading. So, in what we're beginning with, within issue 44, in that first paragraph in issue 44, I say in my lead-in paragraph that then the lha-ram-pa turns to complications that naturally arise. Naturally arise means from the material before, one's naturally led into thinking, well, are we going to extend this to other less profound inferences? You know, here we're talking about an inference into emptiness. We've been talking about that. What about another very important inference, realizing that things are momentary, that in every, as it's said in Jaya Shiva's text on Chandrakirti's supplement to Nagarjuna's treatise on the middle, in every 360th of a snapping of the fingers, oh, I'm a little better today, there's everything's changing. In the consequent school, every 360th of a snapping of the fingers or of the blinking of the eyes is the same length of time of a healthy person. I don't know if I can still be counted as healthy. So that's how fast everything's changing. So, if everything's changing that fast, of course, big buildings can be knocked down. Of course, tsunamis can hit, right? Great fires can erupt. Of course. It shouldn't be surprising. Governments can be knocked down. Good friends can die. Health can be ruined. If things are changing so fast, the foundation for such ruination. It's interesting, the words foundation and ruination. The foundation for such ruination is right there. And similarly also, the foundation for marvelous change is right there. When I was, need to get into the circumstances. Karma being what it is, good karma and the result of good karma or bad karma, when it manifests, draws with it many karmas of similar type, so that when they ripen, good or bad, it ripens with great magnitude. So it may appear to be the ripening of one action, but it draws with it the results of many other karmas. So as it's said in Sutra, a huge tree grows from a single acorn, from a single seed, huge tree. So how do you get a huge tree from a single seed? You get it from many cooperative causes, a lot of soil, water, sunlight, and so forth. So, this is a high-level example, but not as high or as deep. This is a deep example. It's choosing a deep example, but nowhere near as deep as realizing emptiness. So realizing something very deep, you could say very profound, but nowhere near as profound as emptiness, but has shattering effect for one who realizes it, and it must be realized. If you can't realize this, how can you realize emptiness? And in order to develop realizing emptiness, this is a good one to work on to open up the way to realize emptiness. So, are you going to say that sounds being a product also would appear to an inference realizing that sound is impermanence? Now, he didn't say that the inference realizing that sound is impermanent realizes that sound is a product. He words it carefully that are you going to say that two things appear to the inference realizing that sound is impermanent? One, that sound appears to be impermanent and that sound appears to be a product. He isn't posing the question that this inference realizes that sound is impermanent and the sound is a product. He poses, he doesn't have he doesn't pose a question about two realizations happening at the same time, but of two appearances happening at the same time. And I think the earlier Hopkins, at the end of this chapter, was positing that the two realizations happened at the same time. And that's a correction I've made. And the various writers have ways of getting around this, of the impact of the one realization affects the other.
I hear that actually about one realization affecting the other. I come back to that thing of explicit and implicit that we spent so much time on before.
Yes.
And it seems that would kind of solve part of this problem about how the two are there.
Yeah, and that's how Gyaltsab, remember, in his reporting what Tsongkhapa said to him, that's how he reported it to us. And Tsongkhapa did not write it up that way himself.
Yeah.
and no one else did in Tsongkhapa's tradition except for Gyaltsab.
But nobody else refuted it either.
No one, yeah, it's like they gingerly sent it away, but one can tell that they're refuting it.
Yeah, but when they don't do it directly, they're making the issue.
They're not begging the issue. That's one way of handling the issue.
Just avoid it. That's right. I'm just making
Well, they're not avoiding it. They're locking it up in the closet. They're saying, "You mean you didn't get the point?"
If we hear the statement about the dependent arising, well, now presenting the qualm is as with the assumption that dependent arising appears to that inference, realizing that a sprout is empty by the sign of dependent arising. So here, are we not drawing a distinction between sprout appearing to that inference and dependent arising appearing to that inference as the basis of the negation?
Well, yeah, that's the same thing.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, same thing.
I mean, the question.
Yeah.
So they're saying sprout, not only sprout appears as the basis of negation, but dependent arising appears as the basis of negation.
Yeah.
That's what's
Right. And then, as I remember, Geshe Benden Tarpa, I think so. I think he asked the question, do you ascertain the appearance? I mean, what does it mean if it appears? So he probes that one. So if you have two ascertainments at the same time, are you really getting around the problem? So anyway. So if we can move on, leaving that problem there. So there's this technique of having the appearance perspective and the ascertainment perspective. And we've just introduced the problem. Is what appears in the appearance perspective known? If it's known, does known mean ascertained? You know, if it isn't, what does known mean? You know, we just introduced the problem. Is ascertained in the appearance perspective and ascertained in the ascertainment perspective different, a different sort of thing? You know, I'm I'm playing with carrying that out, and I'm not capable of carrying it out, and I don't know who is. And saying, oh, time's passing on, we need to read some more. We need to see if it comes below. It won't. It won't. I don't think it will. And okay. Now there's this list of which Pubucho, just in the, well, now it's two centuries ago. And I was shown around the Dalai Lama's palace at Trebong. The western side, the whole western side of Trebong is the Dalai Lama's palace. And I was given some books there by a nice monk who felt, I needed some books. It was great. I needed them, and I've used them. It was wonderful. Anyway, 5 types. And with the 5th one, correct effect signs in 5 types. Provide a means of inferring causal attributes. And these just go to show how rich inference also is. We learn how rich direct perception is. How much is going on in direct perception. Even scholarship outside of these circles gets extremely simplistic about what's going on in direct perception, as if almost nothing is going on. Whereas even knowing that someone is your mother, knowing that someone is your father, how much direct perception gets educated in what at least Gelupa claims is in the Dignaga Dharmakirti tradition. Now, I spent quite a bit of time reading this morning, just because, as I say, it's a rather simple explanation, but it may seem to be excessively complicated, and I claim that it's easily unpacked. That last sentence of mine says it's simple, that it's excessively complicated, and that it's easily unpacked. And I spent quite a bit of time unpacking it this morning again. So, moreover, if we do some slow reading, even when an inference, so that's a consciousness, it's not words, X is Y because it's, W. It's a consciousness realizing that my body does not inherently exist. Now I'm substituting words, right? My body instead of sprout does not inherently exist, is generated by the sign dependent arising. So my body does not inherently exist because of being a dependent arising, right? It means the inference is generated, having the capacity also of inferring another attribute of that predicate. The predicate does not inherently exist, right? That means emptiness, is empty of inherent existence. So that inference, which is a consciousness realizing emptiness, does not inherently exist. that consciousness also has the capacity, based on the reason of dependent arising, to know something else. Right? Having the capacity means it can infer, based on that same reason, another attribute of that predicate. The proposition is, my body does not inherently exist or is empty of inherent existence. The predicate is empty of inherent existence, right? Okay. And hence, although at its own time, that means that inference's own time, it's just been generated, and it's thinking, my body's empty of inherent existence. And that's not just words, it's really knowing that. All wrong ideas to the contrary have been removed, and it's knowing that. Like, it's been struck by lightning. Does not ascertain that my body is produced from a seed. My body is a dependent arising, or is a dependent arising, is produced from my mother's egg and my father's sperm, or even just simply was in my mother's body as a slimy, whatever, right? So at that time, when it's realizing is empty of inherent existence, that consciousness is generated in a manner allowing for inducing that realization, right? That consciousness is ready to realize that, but it's not realizing it at that time. Okay, so that takes care of that paragraph. Got a problem? Bring it up.
I have one, I think a little bit basic question, but isn't it that if we go one step before this inference realizing by the sign of dependent arising, so it seems to me that first we have inference realizing the sign of dependent arising, so we understand that. After that, we understand that body does not inherently exist, and this also has the capacity to again at a later moment induce the understanding that body is dependent arising. So it seems like we start with dependent arising, we go to emptiness, and again we can go to dependent arising. Maybe this is not clear to me. It seems like we return to the same point somehow.
That's a good point. Go to the same point, or some variation of it.
Maybe you deepened it. I don't know, but
no, I think you're right.
Maybe like the quality is very similar.
Yes. Yes, I think you're right. I couldn't say no. I think yeah. It's either exactly that, dependent arising, or some variation of it. Because it's so intimately associated with that reason. Yeah, good point. But it is some attribute of that reason. Causal attribute, attribute of the cause. Attribute of the cause. So not exactly but yes, you're returning to the same. What's going through my mind also is when I'm realizing that my body is a dependent, or when I'm trying to realize that my body is a dependent arising, I would have had sub reasons. And among those sub reasons, what am I? Because it's dependent on, food and, situation of living. And frankly, I would take it back and back and back, and dependent on, the mother's ovum, egg, father's seed, and there I was in that form, living in my mother's womb. And so the causal, that's just a cute way of saying attribute of the cause, is going to be maybe even something I went, one of those many meditations that I went through or should have gone through. Attribute of the cause. So you can see from the example what this is referring to. And I think it's exactly what you said. What Slovenia said. I think that'll be your new name. We can straighten out this confusion. The confusion of 1 and 2. It's good to have a laugh in these desperate days. They're not so desperate. It's what to be expected, right? Didn't I say that at the beginning? Of course, there'll be a pandemic. And there'll be an end to the pandemic. And then another one to follow. Then, for example, now this is the one where I had the problem. Why not start with an easier example? The easier example would have been with respect to the subject on the smoky pass. Now, the easier example would be fire exists because smoke exists. Why not start with that one? He didn't start with that one. Fire exists because smoke exists. And then use this one as the it provides a means of inferring an attribute of the cause. If he used that one with respect to the subject on a smoky pass, fire exists because smoke exists.
Well, that's a different kind of effect cause, right? I mean, effect sign. That's the...
Yeah, but no, enough, yeah. And that would not be number 5. But, well, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. But it provides a means of inferring an attribute of a cause. Could it?
Because the predicate itself is, it's just looking at, I think that division, isn't it just looking at what the predicate itself is? And
I'm wondering. Then, then every every effect cause, every effect cause would be number 5 if you take it my way. That's a good point.
hold that pretty well in a debate.
Yeah, it would work. It'd be a cute debate, wouldn't it? It would be a Jeffrey Hopkins debate. You could name it that. Oh, so you've explained to us why he uses this. It's an example of that's interesting. Thank you. Okay. God, I'd like to start with any effect. I'd like to say that any effect, any effect sign would provide a means of inferring an attribute of a cause. Oh, fascinating. Okay. So instead he's providing a number 5 that provides another number 5. That provides, that does do this. Okay. Wow. Well, you've made me think. Okay, with respect to the subject, on a smoky past, there exists the capacity for fire to produce changes in fuel because smoke exists. So that that inference not only infers the inference generated in dependence on that sign, not only infers fire. Now you see, that's where I raised the question. Does it infer fire? I would say no. I would say it infers the capacity for fire to generate changes in fuel. Oh, that's the, well, because that's the sign. What am I missing? Can you solve that problem, Los Antonio? My problem?
I'm sure that I don't understand your problem that clearly.
That's your problem.
You're throwing the problem back to me.
Why is it inferring
That sign,
fire as well as the capacity to produce change that fire has?
not only the inference generated, so what's the statement there? So upon the sign. So Tunden Lala Churchen. Is it Mayode?
Mayode, 말해. 두둔 하나 치치는 아니 내 부싱아
Yeah, because that's what it says in the note.
내 부싱 교독도행 있는 거 여대 두어 여대.
Yeah, so it doesn't say Mayode.
Right, but like venerable children, I think that makes sense to me. That would you say that if you know that fire's doing something, you know there's fire there. That makes sense to me.
So you can take fire as a separate object of inference here. I mean, that's what he says.
Well, they would both be the jujitsu made.
So fire. I mean, that's what he says. that you're inferring fire. I mean, he says fire is the predicate of the proposition. I'm saying fire isn't the predicate of the proposition. The capacity for fire to produce changes in fuel is the predicate of the proposition because of the way it's worded.
Probably both would be.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he's saying. I mean, he's informing us that fire is a predicate of the proposition, and the capacity for fire to produce changes in fuel is another predicate of the proposition. That somehow we get two predicates of the proposition.
Well, like when you have the normal or the standard one for proving the effect cause as an actual effect sign, which proves an actual cause, you have the subject on the Smoky Mountain Pass. Fire exists because smoke exists, and you can posit for that as the predicate.
Yeah.
As you could posit fire as well as the existence of fire.
Oh, fire and the existence of fire. So on this one, you can posit fire as a predicate proposition, and the capacity of fire to produce changes in fuel as a predicate of the proposition.
That seems to make sense.
Okay.
I've never worked with that sign before, to be honest. That's not one I've seen in any of the Buddhist texts.
Yeah. And you can see why Tan-dar lha-ram-pa has searched out this list of fire, provide a means of inferring attributes of a cause. He wants to. He searched it out in order to buttress the qualm that even for common things like inferring fire from smoke and attributes of smoke, right? This is getting really common. We're going to have to say that two things are appearing to an inference. Are you going to say that? Are you going to say that? And, okay? Not okay. I'm being like my great teacher, Ngawang Langden, the Tibetan Ngawang Langden, not the Mongolian Ngawang Langden. Not that I've never been taught by the Mongolian. He's very famous also. Abbot of Gaumont, who was in France. And a lot of people in France think that I'm talking about him, and I'm not. It so happens that my teacher, Ngawang Langden, also stopped in France on his way to America. Anyway, okay. Thanks. This discussion has been helpful to me.
Jeffrey, can I go back to one of the points that came up at the beginning?
Yes, please.
This was just, well, also, Venerable Children's questioning the difficulty with asserting this whole process as being one of explicit, implicit realization. It did seem like back when we had that quote by Jirinpoche from the Ocean of Reasoning, I think it's in the book a few times, but on page 328 is one of the places where he does kind of explicitly refute these three possibilities of what could be the meaning of dependent arising or emptiness goes as the meaning of dependent arising, and he does say, what is it? Even if it is asserted that emptiness is the implicit meaning of explicitly ascertaining dependent arising, this is not feasible as before. So that's the reason he gives is only as full as before, but it seems like he's referring to the if he says would be if it were like the import of positing that the bulbous flat bottom able to hold fluid as the meaning of pot, that would be the as before, right? So
Yes.
Is the basic point here that when we talk about implicit, explicit realization, I guess to kind of put it into a Western philosophy framework, that's really something that's more akin to a priori knowledge, like it's something that shouldn't rely on extra training, and that it just happens totally naturally. You realize a pot, you realize a flat bulbous base water holder. Done and done. It's done, said and done. Is that kind of the point?
I'm not capable of, I don't know what a priori means. Sorry.
A priori means it's sort of a natural, sort of innate knowledge that doesn't depend upon having some kind of extra experience of any real world phenomena. Now here, of course, it's not an exact equivalent. I'm not trying to say that, but in the sense that it's just indicating a functioning of the mind that doesn't require any extra training or reasoning process for the implicit-explicit relationship. Which is the problem with asserting that emptiness going as the meaning of dependent arising could be that, because that requires an extra process of reflection and learning different reasons and going through them repeatedly.
Well, my automatic response is that if it were implicit, you wouldn't be just, let's see, something would be replacing the object of negation. And put in my terms, you wouldn't just be focusing on the absence of the object of negation when you realize emptiness. So, he gives, in the end of this paragraph, Tan-dar gives a second example, and also ascertainment is induced, in which this party, this person, thinks that such a mode of blazing fire without question, without question just means there's no problem, changes fuel to ash. Similarly, within the depths of the mind of a party for whom, so this is me, my body is proven to be without inherent existence through the sign of dependent arising, there is ascertainment in the sense of being very much able to be induced. So he's qualifying ascertainment. What does ascertainment means? It's full up with being able to be induced, thinking such a mode of my body's emptiness of self-power, emptiness of self-power. What is dependent? What does emptiness mean? Because you've gotten that emptiness through dependent arising. Which means, so that emptiness has the sense of emptiness of self-power. has, without question, there's no misawa, not eating a devil. The attribute of contingency on another. So my body has the attribute of contingency on another. So that doesn't mean, unlike ping pong, I brought up ping pong before, that you're flipping back and forth. But emptiness of inherent existence, the realization of emptiness of inherent existence, emptiness of inherent existence has this attribute of contingency on another. Why am I yelling? What's that?
The animal doesn't have a hearing aid these days, we're helping.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Very kind.
That certainly is the reason. It is due to this that dependent arising is praised as the monarch of reasonings avoiding the two extremes. Jangya has a very nice section where he shows that all the reasonings meet back to or derive from dependent arising. We'll probably get to that. This is what I think, and I is in brackets. His Holiness has mentioned that in English we have to keep, putting in the agent with verbs. Yeah, well, it is slow reading, isn't it? And the hour has come, and we haven't been shut down. So we'll shut ourselves down. So I'm not sure that through slow reading everything is thrillingly clear. So we'll leave it at that and go from here. And I think issue 46 is the last in the chapter. And I'm sure we'll just speed through it. It's just lovely how the terminology keeps folding back on itself. It's familiar. Nevertheless, it still requires slow reading due to the literality of the. Let's blame it on the translator. I don't know who it is. Somebody. I met him once. Perhaps I'll meet him again. Wave my black finger at him. So, see you around. Good day.